Imagine you could control exactly how other people see you. Not just your appearance, not just your words, your entire narrative, your history, your identity, the story other people tell about you when you're not in the room. Amy Dunne doesn't just imagine it, she does it. And she does it so completely, so meticulously, so far ahead of everyone around her, that by the time anyone realizes what's happened, it's already too late. Gone Girl is a 2014 film directed by David Fincher, based on Gillian Flynn's best-selling novel. If you haven't seen it, here's what you need to know. Amy Dunne stages her own disappearance, frames her husband Nick for her murder, manipulates law enforcement, the media, and the entire public, and walks away not just free, but celebrated. But this video isn't really about the plot, it's about the playbook. Because Amy Dunne's manipulation tactics aren't fictional inventions. They are drawn directly from real psychological patterns, patterns that exist in real relationships, real workplaces, and real lives. And understanding them is one of the most useful things psychology can offer you. To understand Amy Dunne, you have to understand where she came from. Amy Elliott grew up as the real-life inspiration for her parents' beloved children's book series, Amazing Amy. A fictional version of herself that was always smarter, always more successful, always more lovable than the real Amy could ever manage to be. Psychologists who study perfectionism identify a specific and particularly destructive form called socially prescribed perfectionism, the belief that other people require you to be perfect, and that your value as a person is entirely conditional on meeting that standard. Amy didn't just experience this, she had it literalized. There was an actual published version of A Better Amy, available in bookstores, beloved by strangers. The psychological damage of growing up as someone else's idealized fiction is profound. It creates what researchers call a false self, a performed identity built entirely around external expectations rather than internal reality. Amy never got to discover who she actually was. She only ever learned how to perform who other people needed her to be. And here is where everything about Amy Dunne begins to make psychological sense. A person who has never had a genuine self doesn't lose one. Instead, they become extraordinarily skilled at constructing selves on demand, at reading what a situation requires and becoming exactly that. It isn't manipulation in the beginning, it's survival. The manipulation comes later, when she realizes how powerful that skill actually is. The most famous moment in Gone Girl isn't the twist, it's the cool girl speech. Men always say that as the defining compliment, don't they? She's a cool girl. Being the cool girl means I am a hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping, who plays video games, drinks cheap beer, loves threesomes and anal sex, and jams hot dogs and hamburgers into her mouth while somehow maintaining a size 2. Amy's monologue is one of the most psychologically precise descriptions of a concept called self-monitoring ever written for the screen. Self-monitoring is the degree to which a person adjusts their behavior, appearance, and expressed attitudes to fit what they perceive others want to see. High self-monitors are chameleons. They read social situations rapidly and adapt accordingly. Amy is an extreme high self-monitor. She constructed an entirely false identity, the cool girl, and maintained it for years. Not because she was deceived into it, but because she understood, with terrifying clarity, exactly what Nick wanted, and she chose to become it. The psychological insight the speech offers isn't just about gender performance, it's about the fundamental nature of manipulation. The most dangerous manipulators don't force, they don't threaten, they study. They identify exactly what the other person most wants to see, and they become it, until they don't need to anymore. When Amy stops performing the cool girl, Nick experiences what psychologists call a sudden personality change in a partner, one of the most disorienting experiences a person can have in a relationship. The person you fell in love with appears to have vanished, replaced by someone you don't recognize. This isn't a coincidence, it's the mechanism. The cool girl was a hook, and once Nick was caught, married, financially entangled, emotionally dependent, Amy no longer needed the performance. The term gaslighting comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband systematically manipulates his wife into doubting her own perception of reality. In clinical psychology, it describes a pattern of behavior designed to make someone question their own memory, judgment, and sanity. It is one of the most psychologically destructive forms of abuse precisely because it attacks the victim's ability to trust themselves. Most gaslighting operates at an intimate personal level. A partner denying something they said, reframing events, questioning the other person's memory. Amy Dunne takes gaslighting to a scale that is almost incomprehensible. She doesn't just gaslight Nick, she gaslights law enforcement. She gaslights the media. She gaslights the entire American public. Her mechanism is the fabricated diary. Amy writes months of fake diary entries, meticulously crafted to establish a false narrative of her marriage. Each entry carefully plants evidence of Nick's volatility, his control, his cruelty. Each entry is written in the voice of a woman who is frightened but still loves her husband. The entries are not evidence of what happened. They are a constructed reality, authored from scratch, designed to make everyone who reads them experience a version of events that never occurred. Psychologists who study forensic manipulation identify this as narrative control, the deliberate construction and management of the story other people use to understand reality. Most people manipulate narratives on a small scale, shading the truth, emphasizing some facts over others. Amy operates at the extreme end of this spectrum. She doesn't shade the truth, she authors it from scratch. And the most chilling detail is this: it works. Not because people are stupid, but because Amy understands something fundamental about human psychology. We don't experience reality directly. We experience the stories we are told about reality. And whoever controls the story controls everything. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd identified one of the most common tactics used by manipulative individuals in the 1990s. She called it DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. The pattern works like this. When confronted with wrongdoing, the manipulator first denies, flatly, confidently, without hesitation, then attacks, going on the offensive against the person doing the confronting, and then reverses victim and offender, reframing the situation so that the manipulator becomes the victim and the actual victim becomes the aggressor. Amy Dunne executes DARVO at a level that should be studied in textbooks. When Nick cheats and their marriage deteriorates, Amy doesn't confront the situation directly. She denies, to herself, to the world, that she is anything other than the perfect devoted wife. She attacks by constructing an elaborate frame that positions Nick as a murderer. And she reverses victim and offender so completely that by the time she returns home, Nick is publicly reviled and Amy is the nation's sweetheart. The reason DARVO is so effective is that it exploits a fundamental human bias. We find it very difficult to believe that a convincing victim is actually a perpetrator. Our empathy is triggered by displays of vulnerability. And Amy is a masterclass in performed vulnerability. Her tears are real-looking. Her fear is real-looking. Her love is real-looking. None of it is real. Researchers who study coercive control consistently find that the people most skilled at DARVO are also the people who are best at reading what their audience needs to see. They perform vulnerability for audiences that respond to vulnerability. They perform strength for audiences that respond to strength. Amy does both simultaneously, presenting as a victim to the public while demonstrating total control to Nick in private. That ability to perform different versions of herself for different audiences simultaneously is perhaps her most frightening skill. So what is actually wrong with Amy Dunne? The film is deliberately ambiguous. David Fincher has said he intentionally avoided labeling Amy clinically. But from a psychological standpoint, the portrait is recognizable. Amy shows significant traits consistent with what the DSM-5 identifies as antisocial personality disorder, characterized by a persistent disregard for the rights of others, repeated deception, manipulation for personal gain, and a lack of remorse. She also shows traits consistent with narcissistic personality disorder, particularly grandiosity, an obsessive need for admiration, and what psychologists call narcissistic rage, an extreme and disproportionate response to perceived slights or wounds to the ego. Nick's infidelity doesn't just hurt Amy, it enrages her at a level that most people cannot access. Because for a narcissist, being cheated on isn't just a betrayal. It is an obliteration of the self, an announcement to the universe that she was not enough. But here's where the psychological picture gets more complicated and more interesting. Amy is also, in her own words, a product of what was done to her. She was never allowed to have a genuine self. She was shaped from childhood into a performance, a product, an amazing Amy who existed to fulfill other people's needs. This doesn't excuse her behavior. Nothing excuses what Amy does. But it does complicate the clean villain narrative. Amy Dunne is what happens when a person with narcissistic traits and antisocial tendencies is also extraordinarily intelligent, deeply wounded, and has spent a lifetime developing the skills to construct and control reality. She is not a random monster. She is a specific product of specific circumstances, and that, as with every character we've examined on this channel, is the most important thing to understand about her. So what does Amy Dunne's manipulation playbook actually teach us? It teaches us that the most dangerous manipulation doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like love. It looks like devotion. It looks like a woman who just wants to be with her husband. It looks like a victim who needs protecting. The tactics Amy uses, identity performance, narrative control, DARVO, gaslighting at scale, exist on a spectrum. At the extreme end, they produce Amy Dunne. At the mild end, they exist in ordinary relationships everywhere. The person who rewrites the history of an argument so they were always the injured party. The partner who becomes exactly what you need until they don't need to anymore. The colleague who positions themselves as the victim every time they are held accountable. Amy Dunne is fiction, but the psychology she embodies is not. Understanding DARVO means you recognize it when someone uses it on you. Understanding narrative control means you notice when someone is managing your perception rather than communicating honestly. Understanding the cool girl means you ask, is this person showing me who they are or showing me who I want to see? Amy wins in Gone Girl. She wins completely. Nick is trapped. She has everything she wanted. But the film leaves us with one final uncomfortable question. How many people in your life right now are playing a version of this game? And are you the player or the piece? Next time on Real Psychology, we're going deeper into the dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, and the three film villains who perfectly embody each one. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.